Okay, so now I want to talk with you about limits, boundaries, and the keep it simple system. I value simplicity because what I know for myself is that when I'm uncomfortable with something, I have a tendency to intellectualize it or otherwise complicate it. And that has the net effect of stalling me out, leaving me stuck, and not making the changes that I need to make. So, if we use simplicity around the idea of boundaries, the idea is to set some limits and let people know what it is that I'm willing to do and what it is that I'm not, what I'm able to do and what I'm not. I have a very strong awareness that I teach people how to treat me based on what I tolerate, based on how I react, based on a lot of things. So clear, concise communication really is the key to setting boundaries. I encourage people to use as few words as possible because what I've noticed is the more uncomfortable we are, the more words we use. And so we'll tell a story or we'll hint or allude to things instead of coming right out and saying them. Obviously, we want to be respectful and as kind as possible in how we express ourselves, but it's important to be clear because in anything short of that is going to result in unhealthy dynamics with coworkers, with supervisors, and I think what it's really about is being true to ourselves. What I say to the people I supervise is that we don't protect what we don't value. And boundaries and limit setting really are about protecting self. So, my hope is that progressively you see value not just in your efforts professionally, but in the person that you are, and that you tolerate things like compliments and praise and recognition, because there's an excellent chance that those are uncomfortable for you to receive, yet holding on to them and internalizing them will help you to build more confidence and faith in yourself as you continue to work in the field. Countless times and places that I found it necessary to set boundaries, whether it was ongoing requests to work overtime, ongoing expectations that I'd work with especially difficult clients, and I really needed to weigh what was reasonable for me to take on. Again, early in my career, I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof, so I said yes to everything. And I kind of became a go to person for difficult clients. For, yeah, if there's overtime that has to be worked, there was a clear expectation that I would work it. And again, it was I who created that expectation. So, in order to communicate our limits to others, obviously we need to know what those are and we need to know when we're pushing them. What I've learned, especially as an employer, is that I don't disrespect the limits of the people who work for me. I'm not asking them to constantly strive or to push those limits, but I've been guilty of that myself. So I have come to see accepting my limitations as really self respect and self preservation. And in the absence of those things, obviously, nothing's good is going to come from this. Um, there's a lot of things that you know that maybe you just don't expect to be confronted with. When I was in grad school, they told me over and over and over again that I must never enter into personal relationships with the people that I serve. And the thing that was presented to me a bizarre number of times was that I should never have sex with my clients. And I remember being amazed and disturbed by that. And so I posed the question to one of my professors, why does this even need to be said? And she directed me to the state licensing website where it's public information as to why people lose their professional licenses. And that was the number one reason. And obviously, that's unconscionable. It can't be tolerated. It's a huge imbalance of power. But what I noticed later was that for all of the emphasis that was placed on how I relate to my clients, there really was no conversation about how I should relate to my colleagues, how I should relate to subordinates, how I should relate to supervisors. And again, I hope your experience is very different than mine. but I had a million different experiences where my boundaries were crossed. I had a lot of opportunities to have affairs. I was invited into any number of situations that were completely unhealthy for me. And I guess the reason that I struggled was I had this disconnect and this disbelief like, is this really happening? And yeah, it was. And I've had colleagues who are wonderful and healthy human beings who have been extraordinarily successful. And I've had colleagues who are distinctly unhealthy and in active addiction or trapped in their own mental illness. And the ways in which they related to me were distinctly unhealthy. So I really want to have you go into the field not terribly guarded, just aware, and to be considering how comfortable you are with saying no, how comfortable you are setting limits, and what kind of boundaries need to be set in your personal life as well as your professional life. Do some writing on that. Let me know what you find out. Counseling@roadrunner.com. Really want to hear about the questions that you have and the areas that you're struggling in. Thanks.